Privilege, as defined by the Oxford Dictionary, is a special right, advantage, or immunity granted or available only to a particular person or group. Pulling out the dictionary definition of a fairly commonly used word is probably insulting to a lot of you, but you will have to suck it up. This is the cat's time. There's a lot of discussion surrounding privilege in the world of Arknights. The privilege of the uninfected versus the infected is a pretty obvious example, but in a world as cruel and violent as Terra, one of the greatest privileges one can have is empathy. The ability to truly feel for another. Many who call Terra their home abandon such a naive concept in order to survive. Mercenaries who abandon their emotions for the sake of getting paid, exploited workers who turn a blind eye to the suffering around them just to keep the boat from rocking, even the infected who turn a blind eye to the abuse they receive from those around them just to hold on to a little bit of normality. Ultimately, those who choose to feel for others often end up hurting themselves needlessly in order to lessen the suffering of others. And so today, as you should know if you looked at the thumbnail or the title of this video, or just when I referenced the sad cat, I want to talk about the resident sad cat of Terra, an operator who has been with us from the beginning, Jessica. Primarily about her struggle in Davistown to help anyone around her, and the price she had to pay for not accepting the world as it is. To say Jessica was born with a silver spoon in her mouth is probably underselling it. Jessica was born into the wealthy Brunley family, a family of major renown within Colombia. Her grandfather Owen was the co-founder of Raytheon, one of the largest arms manufacturers on Terra. Selling weapons on the war-torn continent of Terra is effectively a license to print money, so of course her family became incredibly wealthy. And of course, Jessica benefited from this. Her father Bonnie is the current CEO of Raytheon, so it's not like they are ever going to be strapped for cash. This particular upbringing has given her a poor understanding of the value of money. Her allowance alone probably paying her more than most executives on Terra, although we never get a specific figure on what she is given. Unfortunately for Jessica, she was born with a nervous disposition, being a crybaby since birth. But our beloved sad cat never let it get her down. Being the youngest member of her family, where all of her siblings were more talented than her, Jessica set out to prove she could be just as capable in her own way. In addition to her go-get-it attitude, she had a very supportive grandfather, who, despite building his fortune on blood money, always encouraged Jessica, reminding her to never give up in life. Not quite with great power comes great responsibility in terms of life-altering quotes, but hey, the weapons dealer loved his granddaughter. I am sure the now orphaned children and grandchildren appreciate that. And so Black Steel enters Jessica's life. Her method of proving her competence would be through becoming a capable operator of a private military company. Pretty interesting decision to prove you can run a massive company by becoming a mercenary. Probably says something about the types of people who can be CEOs, but I will leave that implication hanging in the air. To give a TLDR on Black Steel, they are the largest private military company within Colombia. Their primary purpose is carrying out the dirty dealings of the Colombian military. Stuff that can't be on record or requires plausible deniability. So, if you need to avoid an international incident or make sure some undesirable poor people need to be gently persuaded to leave, you send in Black Steel. The founder, Rupert, better known as Cliff, cause if I was called Rupert I would also change my name, set it up to have a hold on the flow of war. And despite not being that involved with Jessica during her stint in Black Steel, Cliff would play a pivotal role in her development, primarily through his and Woodrow's messy breakup in Come Catastrophe or Wakes of Vultures. Jessica's time at Black Steel wouldn't be entirely without incident. Her early career was hampered by her anxious personality. Jessica had even considered resigning before one Lishcombe would be made her mentor. With Lishcombe's guidance, Jessica would become a fine operator, her record being impeccable despite her personality. As seen in the Black Steel manga, despite not always being able to meet Lishcombe's initial expectations, Jessica possesses an incredible drive to improve, putting in far more effort than others so that she will never make the simple mistakes. Through Lishcombe, Jessica would meet Franca and Vanilla, and following Franca's infection, Jessica would become one of the Black Steel members sent to Rhodes Island. Now, I know I mentioned that she was rich before, but now that Rhodes Island is relevant, I would like to make it known that she purchased her own firearm. Guns are already rare on Terra outside of Laterano, so you can imagine how much they would cost. She even had to sacrifice buying snacks so that she could afford high-quality etched ammo. What snacks she was eating that would allow her to save as much to afford ammo, we don't know. Even Doberman was left shocked after hearing it. Needless to say, Moneybags has some pretty expensive taste. During her time in Rhodes Island, Jessica would improve drastically, being involved in both the Chernobog and Victoria crisis. Jessica would even survive a confrontation with Frostnova. During these battles, Jessica would see fellow members of Black Steel and Rhodes Island lose their lives in the fighting. This would deeply impact the empathetic girl who would carry that weight with her going forward, and definitely not come back to haunt her during her time in Davistown. This is what we in the business call foreshadowing. And speaking of Davistown, finally the event that pushes Jessica into the spotlight. Come catastrophes or wakes of vultures. This event places Jessica at the center of a conflict between four groups. The people of Davistown, Black Steel, and the banking company that is slowly but surely taking over Davistown. The fourth player is of course the government of Colombia itself. But that's more as a background specter than an actual active participant. During the winter of 1099, Black Steel Worldwide dispatched a squad of operators to Davistown. The once productive mining town is on the verge of collapse. Financial mismanagement that is in no way orchestrated by the bank has forced the town to declare bankruptcy, and Black Steel is in charge of claiming it for the government. Liscombe, Franca, Almond, and Jessica are sent as the forward operating squad to make contact with the town prior to the arrival of the Black Steel landship. Why is the CEO of a major military company personally going to a rundown mining town? Good question, imaginary viewer who asked that question. I'm gonna call you Victor if that's cool with you. Well, it's because one of his old friends called the town his home, Woodrow. Cliff tells Jessica not to pity the poor people and gives her a bullet to be personally hand-delivered to Woodrow. Is this a secret buried bit of empathy that Cliff still has buried down within him, as if reaching out to the once idealistic angel that he was before the war? No, he just thinks Woodrow should have the bullet. Either way, the Black Steel squad is on the move, and they are ambushed by bandits who once called Davistown their home before even reaching the town. Franca, Liscombe, and Almond rescue a local named Miles, while Jessica gets separated in the carnage. While lost in the woods, alone and afraid, she would meet Woodrow, who is working as a local hunter. Woodrow escorts her back to Davistown, as her communicator was broken, so leaving her in the woods wasn't an option. They choose to wait at a local diner run by Coldshot, and while there, Jessica meets Leon, the city's demolition expert and local mine share owner. Write that down as it will be on the test later. Before meeting up with Jessica, Liscombe and Franca head to Davistown's bank, where they meet the manager and her secretary Sylvia. Sylvia is pretty cool. She is the only bank worker who is given any level of characterization. The faceless bureaucracy that consumes all put into it and offers nothing in return has no need of nuance. Long story short, the mayor abandoned the town, and so the bank is now running the town as the de facto government. It does help that they own everything, and their actions as the town's government have led to some predictable outcomes. Some of the townspeople simply abandon the town, while others rush to the bank for emergency loans. But after all that setup, Jessica reunites with her squad when they come to the diner with Miles. Here, Leon requests the squad's help in conducting maintenance on the rundown Originium power furnace, which has gone without maintenance for so long that it almost melts down. Luckily, disaster is averted, but considering the state of the furnace, it is clear that Davistown is beyond the point of simple fixes. And so, Mr. Bionicle, what does any of this have to do with Jessica feeling bad for the people around her? I'm getting to it. You need some context. I don't just want to call this Come Catastrophe or Wakes of Vultures badly explained. I want to talk specifically about Jessica. And following this introduction to Davistown, Jessica and her town finally begin seeing the nightmare underneath. Benny, Leon's adopted son, is assaulted in the street by local gangsters. Jessica, of course, comes to his aid and learns from Benny that they were hired by the bank to harass their debtors. As you can imagine, assaulting someone's son just to get some money doesn't sit well with Jessica. So Jessica recruits Woodrow to help her convince Leon to sell his shares in the mine to pay off his debt. Initially reluctant, but after learning what happened to Benny, he agrees to sell. Unfortunately, he is still short on money, even after all that, so Jessica foots the rest of the bill. An act of kindness, and one she, as an incredibly rich person, could do without issue. However, the bank has alternative approaches to harassing residents. Firstly, a new one, using Black Steel to guard the bank. that keeps the unwashed masses from getting any ideas. Secondly, offering loans that the people couldn't possibly be able to repay. Thirdly, paying locals to assault others to force them to pay their debts. And finally, in order to clear your debt, forcing the residents to become frontier workers. And all Jessica and her squad can do is watch it all happen. While Liscombe and Franca aren't happy with this assignment, Jessica is downright disturbed. Sure, she has seen what combat does to people's lives, but watching a peaceful town be torn down like this is disturbing to her. So she spends time with Leon, Miles, Coldshot, Woodrow, and Benny to take her mind off of it. They have a meal to celebrate Leon's debt-free status. While initially a happy event, the mood is broken by Benny announcing his plans to leave Davistown to find a better life elsewhere. Coldshot and Miles can only give their approval, while Leon is devastated at losing another son. Cole was another son Miles had adopted. He had a relationship with Sylvia before leaving Davistown to join Blacksteel. Here, he operated under the name Black Plate, and would die during the Chernobog crisis. Jessica learns all this while trying to convince Benny to stay with Leon, but he rejects such a possibility. Davistown can't be saved by Jessica, just like how she couldn't save Carl. You can imagine how much this messed with Jessica. Since she arrived, she's only tried to help Leon and Benny, but by the time she entered the scene, it was already too late. And things would just get worse from there. Riots erupted throughout Davistown a few weeks after Benny left. Blacksteel is forced to defend the bank, while the town burns around them. A mixture of desperate townspeople and bank agitators led to this, and only the timely arrival of Fort Barron puts a stop to it. The shadow cast by the landship only foreboding more suffering for the people. Many of the civilians were injured, and Leon lost his home in the fire. Both his kids, his livelihood in the mines, and now his home. Truly a man on the brink, and another weight on Jessica's conscience. Finally, the true scale of the insidious actions the bank has taken is made clear to Jessica. The bank has been illegally providing low-interest loans, but raising the interest rates at their leisure following securing the loan. This, of course, makes repayments impossible. This was ultimately to force all the residents off the plate, so that once Davistown was handed over to the government, they would have cleaned up the plate to attract wealthy investors who wouldn't like to share the new town with poor people. Incredibly illegal? Yes, but highly profitable, so the Colombian government couldn't care less. Realizing that this is a little above her pay grade, Jessica hopes that Woodrow can use his friendship with Cliff to solve the problem using Blacksteel's influence. Woodrow is initially reluctant, considering Cliff left him to rot in a POW camp, but buries his pride to help his community. Cliff of course tells him that this is just business, and if Blacksteel won't carry out the dirty work, Columbia will get a less principled PMC to do it. Another failure for Jessica, so in an act of desperation, she attempts to pay the debt herself. The heir of Ratian loans that not even her considerable wealth can cover the absurd debt that the bank has inflicted on Davistown. Almost $28 million. $27,600,000 to be specific. And even if she could get that much money, it would only delay the inevitable by about 3 months. It was around this point most of the residents hit their limit. Coldshot, who Jessica had offered money to, returns the money to Jessica, having agreed to sell the diner, and Miles agrees to head to the frontiers to settle his debts. But in one last act of protest, the citizens of Davistown peacefully protest in front of the bank. The bank managers, seeing this peaceful protest, immediately ask Blacksteel to fire on the unarmed crowd. Luckily for everyone involved, Franca and Liscombe were there, so they refused. Jessica even ran off to tell Cliff what was happening, and despite not being persuaded by Jessica to intervene to protect the civilians, makes it clear to the director of the bank that only he can order Blacksteel to do anything, regardless of what it says in a contract. Interestingly enough here, Jessica, when asked why she joined Blacksteel by Cliff, says that she joined it purely for her own ambition. Cliff respects the honest answer, but despite her ambition, Jessica has not given up on the people of Davistown, unlike Cliff. Although ultimately their protest achieved nothing, and following it much of the remaining citizens left for the frontier, the citizens of Davistown had their time in the sun. Coldshot and Woodrow are both planning to follow, with only Leon still wishing to remain in the town. Sylvia, the bank assistant I haven't mentioned in like 2 pages, finally grows a backbone and decides to do something to stick it to the bank. She proposes to Coldshot, Leon, Woodrow, and Jessica that they legally acquire the bank's ill-gotten goods. Sylvia provides them with insider secrets to the bank, and so a bank heist is organized. But first, Jessica must pay one more price to help Davistown. She must lose what she has built in Blacksteel. All the Blacksteel squads are returning to Fort Barron, as due to the decreased population, security is no longer necessary. Jessica refuses to return though. She wishes to stay in order to help pull off this bank heist. Liscom and Franca wish her the best before leaving her behind a parting gift, providing her with all the equipment she would need. Leon takes the explosives and lines the town's furnace, preparing to cut off the escape route they will use. Meanwhile, Coldshot, Woodrow, and Jessica break into the bank and after using some advanced interrogation techniques, manage to acquire much of the bank's ill-gotten gains. Blacksteel of course has to respond to this blatant crime. They difficulty tweak it, if you will. Woodrow and Jessica use themselves as decoys, while Coldshot escapes with the cash. Learning what was going on, Liscom and Franca chase after Jessica, hoping to find her before anyone else gets their hands on her. Cliff, meanwhile, orders Jessica and Woodrow not to be harmed. He would, however, not have to go looking for Woodrow, as he came to him. Leon, after finishing laying the explosives, decides he can't leave Davistown after all. As such, once Coldshot is out of danger, he detonates the explosives manually, meeting his end within the town that he loves. Well, all Jessica can do is shed tears for him. Woodrow came to Fort Barron to kill Cliff, but unfortunately, life isn't so simple. As Sancta's empathy exists for this exact reason. Both of them have suffered from the wars they have fought, and both have had to abandon their dreams due to the world's cruelty. As such, the two square off, with both shooting the hat off the other. Cliff hoped that Woodrow would use that bullet he gave him to end his life, but Woodrow knows that only Cliff can bear the weight of starting wars to end wars. Woodrow was captured by Blacksteel following this little encounter, and unlike the two men whose empathy was crushed by the world, Jessica still fights to help others for its own sake, evading her fellow Blacksteel members for as long as she could, impressing those who viewed her as nothing more than a spoiled princess just walking in Blacksteel while waiting to inherit her fortune. Nevertheless, Jessica's rebellion really accomplished nothing in Davistown. Sure, Coldshot escaped with some money, but that didn't fix the problem. Davistown would inevitably be sold off and all of its people would be on the frontier. Still, Jessica fires off 8 shots into the sky, venting her anger, her sorrow over what happened here before being taken into custody. Thankfully, the bank never recovered its stolen goods. Coldshot got the money out and delivered it to Sylvia to be returned to its rightful owners, thanks to Cliff sending one of his operators after her. To add further insult to the bank's injury, Cliff would be the one to take over Davistown, not the government. It would be a mobile training station for Blacksteel, so the bank wasn't getting anything back on their cruel investment. Cliff and Woodrow make up, so their old man Yowie may one day happen at some point in the future. Jessica, following her little stunt in Davistown, is in a less than favorable position. Woodrow was always heading for the frontier, so he's good. Jessica, though, refuses to use her father's money to get her out of trouble. She turns down a slap on the wrist in favor of going to the frontier to actually pay for her crimes. You know it's a work of fiction when the rich actually suffer punishment for their crimes. Luckily, Cliff refused her resignation, so she'll have a job whenever she gets back. And so, she heads off to the frontier alongside Woodrow, remembering her grandfather comforting her as a child and bursting into tears, with Woodrow comforting her, reminding her that all new lives begin with tears. And that's the price of Jessica's empathy. She is forced into a life on the frontier for the crime of caring about her fellow men and women. And she is poor now. Rich cat no longer. Only time will tell if she ever gets access to that fortune back. I would assume so, considering her father did try to get her out of the trouble, but maybe this will sever their connection forever. I can't lie, it feels weird returning to covering specific Arknights characters with Jessica. I don't know, maybe I thought it would return with some big bang of a topic for me. like the Doctor or Noel or Amia, maybe even with Siege. But alas, the sad cat sparked the desire within me, and so that's what this video ended up as. Probably going to take me some time to get a formula I like with these videos, but I'm sure ye are ready and able for the journey just as much as I am. Jessica was born into the lap of luxury, but by her own decision, placed into a position to see that which she was shielded from. Jessica, throughout her time with Blacksteel and Rhodes Island, came to know the price of privilege, and, unlike others when faced with the reality of the world, reached out to others in an attempt to shelter them from the storm, and in so doing, reaffirmed the love and compassion she had for those less fortunate than herself. In conclusion, I suppose the real price of privilege was Jessica not being able to afford both sweets and ammo. The sacrifices we must make for our jobs are never ending. Y'all, be good people, and I will talk to you later.